right. Hello, everyone. My name is Marte Patel, and I'm here to share some lessons that we learned at Aschehoug when we created 2 digital product strategies from scratch. So Aschehoug is a publishing house, but we're also an edtech company. And just to give you a sense of our scale and history, we're 250 employees, and we celebrated our 150th anniversary last year. And we've recently been through a transformation when it comes to product development, where we've embraced user-centric and design-driven methodology, and we've adopted an agile mindset and values. And in our schools division, we recently worked on creating digital product strategy for 2 of our products. And this was not a particularly easy or straightforward process for us. So in line with our agile values, my goal today is to share openly and honestly about the lessons we learned as we went through this process. And I'm going to offer 5 concrete takeaways based on our experience in the hope that it might be of value to you. Perhaps you're about to start working on product strategy, or you've tried and you found it difficult, like we did. Or you're in the position that we were a year ago, where you know that you should have a product strategy, but you haven't got around to making one yet. Because according to the recent survey results from the Product in Norway survey, there were 34% of the respondents who said their company has no product strategy. And amongst the respondents who said they do have a product strategy, surprisingly, there were only 7.5% who said they use it. So today I'm going to focus on both the lessons we learned when we created our digital product strategies and also the lessons we are currently learning as we're attempting to implement and use our strategies. So just very briefly, how did we define product strategy? We chose to adopt the strategy framework that Richard Rummel lays out in his book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And he defines good strategy as something that offers a potentially achievable way of surmounting a key challenge. And I find that product strategy can quite easily become abstract. It can be hard to grasp what it actually is. So for us, in essence, it's a plan. It says concrete how we're going to achieve our company's goals and make our product vision a reality. How we're going to go about doing it. So we wanted to answer 3 key questions for our products using the Rummel framework. And the first one was, which specific challenges should we at Aschehoug be trying to solve and why? And we wanted a list of the most promising opportunities that we believed that we could solve in a profitable way. And secondly, we wanted to look at which concrete strategies should we be employing to try and solve those challenges that we'd identified, and which tactics should we use. And the key thing for us here was to try and be really concrete, because it has to be more than just goals, and it has to be more than a product vision. And thirdly, we wanted to try and find out how would we know that we're on the right path. Because historically, we've used a variety of KPIs, so key performance indicators, and we've also adopted the OKR framework, so objectives and key results. And Ida was here yesterday and gave a really good talk on the difference between them and how you could apply them in your company. And we're definitely going to take some learning away from that as we now apply this at Aschehoug. Because we wanted to use the OKRs to try to evaluate whether the strategies that we chose, which are essentially hypotheses, whether they are in fact delivering value, both to our users and to the business. So according to product literature, and also product surveys like the one I just mentioned, it is fairly common to have no product strategy, but every company will have something in place on which you can build. So we started by gathering up all our company's strategy documents, business case, etc., and we used that as foundations on which to build our product strategy, a coherent product strategy. So the first piece of advice I can offer based on our experience is to build the scaffolding around your product strategy first, because our product strategy had to fit in with the rest of our strategy work. You're never starting from scratch. And we found that it was very helpful to build the scaffolding because it helped us identify which specific piece are we missing, what have we already decided on and described, and what is not described at the moment. And the act of examining your strategy work in a new light could also potentially reveal some weaknesses in other areas of strategy. Right, so we've done this, we had our scaffolding in place, and we were ready to jump 2 feet first and start building that product strategy in earnest. And we found out pretty much straight away, product strategy is really hard, and that's why I'm here today to share the lessons that we learned. So in the management group, in the schools division, that done this deep dive into product strategy, we had experience of product discovery, of product delivery, go-to-market, but we realized that we didn't feel confident in product strategy. So I work for Aschehoug Education. We're very passionate about learning, so that's what we did. All the usual suspects here. I already mentioned Richard Rummeld's strategy framework. We also read Inspired and Empowered by Marte Patel. And Gibson Biddle was here at this conference last year and gave a very useful talk on his product strategy framework, which was very helpful for us to be able to compare and contrast different frameworks. And we also saw Ida Ollen give a talk on product strategy here last year, and it was so inspiring to us that we invited her to come in-house at Aschehoug and do some training with us. So in sum, they all gave us some concrete help and inspiration, and they gave us a clear idea on how we might do this for ourselves. But in addition to all those usual suspects, it was tremendously helpful for us to have a real-life example from an industry and a context that's more similar to ours. And we found that in this very insightful article by Carl-Oskar Teien, who's the director of product at Schibsted subscription newspapers. And it details how they went about creating product strategy for Aftenposten, so a print and digital newspaper. And it turns out that they were facing a lot of the same challenges that we were in a publishing house. And the article is really concrete, and it contains a lot of actionable takeaways. And it's so refreshing for us to see a real-life example from a context that's not just Netflix, Google, Amazon, but is a lot more relatable and therefore useful to us. And I think it's great when people are both able and willing to share across the product community. So the second piece of advice I can offer, based on our experience, is to use the product community. There's a lot of models and frameworks that you can use as templates. There's experience, best practice, insight from other companies that you could learn from, potentially pitfalls that you can avoid. And I'd especially urge you to seek out examples from contexts that are similar to yours. And we found that going to product meetups and being active in Slack communities was a really good way to get inspiration. And I'd also like to urge everyone to share back to the product community, because you never know how many people will find it helpful if you share from your context. So we wanted to use the Rummeld strategy framework, and we had the Aftenposten example, and they both helped inspire and guide our work. And we wanted to work on these 3 elements. So what Rummeld calls the diagnosis, which is, right, so which challenges should we be solving? The guiding policy, which is the strategies, and the coherent actions, which are the tactics. And a little bit surprising to us, we got stuck pretty much straight away on the diagnosis. And I say surprising because we had done a lot of discovery work. We had a lot of insight into our users' needs, so pupils and teachers. We knew their needs, unmet needs, pain points. But the work on product strategy revealed to us that we were missing key insight in other areas that we had perhaps not spent enough time on, such as our customers that were churning. Why were they churning? Was it something to do with the product, or was it a wider issue? Was it something we could address? And new customers that chose us, why did they choose us? What delighted them about our products? We should definitely do more of that. So I think it's important at this point to explain that unlike a lot of the software as a service companies that you read about in product literature, who have monthly renewals, we have historically sold 1-year licenses that do not renew, so it's not a subscription. And we have a B2B2C business model, so our users and buyers are not the same people. So doing user interviews does not necessarily answer the question of why did you buy it, why did you not buy it? And historically, in simplified terms, we've only found out about churn once a year during the autumn term. So we've had to rely a lot on leading indicators because our lagging indicators have been really lagging. But through working on product strategy, it revealed to us that there are sources of insight here that we have not been utilizing fully. There are other sources of insight that we've not been using. And so the work had helped reveal a gap in our insight, and we'd identified a blind spot. So our product team spent pretty much a whole quarter on doing intensive discovery work. I'm guessing this might look a bit familiar, impressive Miro board. And we tried to close that gap, tried to get new insight, and it was really tempting at this stage to want to move on with the product strategy work that we were in the midst of doing. This felt like a detour, but we had to spend time in the problem space to really address it, because otherwise we would not choose the right challenges to solve. And the discovery work that we did, it helped close that gap, and we were able to move much closer to getting on with the rest of our product strategy work. But at this point in time, we had been reading product literature, we'd been running a few internal product strategy workshops, and we'd spent a lot of time discussing product strategy, but what we didn't have was anything remotely resembling a product strategy. And I think in hindsight, it'd become almost mythical to us at this point, and we were stuck in a slight state of analysis paralysis. So the third piece of advice I can offer, based on our experience, is to create a draft really early on. Just use a template, make a document, and start jotting things down. It's much easier to edit something that already exists than it is to attempt to write the perfect product strategy from scratch. This is standard product development methodology after all. So once we utilized the same methodology that we used to develop our products and applied it to our work on product strategy, we were able to move on and create drafts of our 2 product strategies. They look something like this. And throughout creating those drafts, we learned a few lessons, which I thought I'd share. The first one is the importance of involvement. It sounds obvious, but you have to involve your product team, and ideally as early as possible. We definitely could have done a better job here. It was due to time constraints, other reasons, but definitely an area that we would have done differently. And secondly, is to set aside enough time to create ownership and alignment across your product team or teams. I know that I don't say consensus, because this should not be a consensus-seeking exercise, but you have to create ownership. And then thirdly, just be prepared that perhaps some of your team members might find it challenging or even demotivating to spend so long in the problem space and to spend time on product strategy, because understandably, they'll want to get on with making the product. And the key here is involvement and explaining why we are creating product strategy. It's supposed to be a really helpful document, a guiding policy. It's not a futile bureaucratic exercise. And we also realized at the end of this that once you've created these drafts, you should start using them actively straight away, even if they're not finished. So we did things like we linked them quite tightly to our OKRs, and we're trying to refer to them as often as is natural, maybe a few more times even. And one of our product teams made poster versions and put them up in the team rooms. So everything to ensure that these do not become dusty Miro boards that no one's opened for months. And we also realized through using this framework that it worked equally well for creating a strong product strategy for an existing product as it did for a brand new product. Because on the left-hand side here is our primary and secondary school market. We launched this product in 2018. We've been selling it for a few years already, but we wanted to create a product strategy that said something about, right, where should we go from here? Where's the product going to go? And on the right-hand side is a teaser for our upcoming upper secondary school product that we're launching in January. And we were able to use the same framework to create a strong product strategy for this product. And for us, this was a strength of the framework that was important because it allowed us to both collaborate and share experiences across our 2 product divisions. So that's a definite strength of the framework that we chose. So with the help of working iteratively and involving our product teams, we were able to finalize a version 1.0 of these 2 product strategies. And once they were made, we realized we learned a few more lessons. So number 1 is that the product strategies have to be really accessible to everyone who's going to use them. So both the product team and all the stakeholders around. They have to be really easy to locate and easy to digest. Which leads me to the second point here. If they're too long and detailed, people will find it really difficult to engage with them. And it's about finding that balance between, you don't want to oversimplify it, because you want to keep that nuance and the complexity, but also you cannot allow them to become bloated. So they have to be succinct. And then thirdly, these product strategies actually have to be useful to the teams that are going to be using them. They have to be concrete, they have to be helpful, and they have to be a go-to document that they'll want to refer to. Which brings me to the fourth piece of advice that I can offer, which is to focus on distilling your product strategy into something that's really concrete, really helpful, and something that the teams can actually use. And this is really difficult, is our experience. So just set aside enough time to do it and involve your product teams and stakeholders. So we've now created these versions 1.0 of our 2 product strategies. And they'll obviously now both be continuously revised as we start to test our hypotheses and we gain new insight. But already they are now clearly defining the direction that we want to take our 2 products. They provide us with clarity and focus because they help us keep that longer-term goal in sight at all times. And we're trying now to make sure that every decision we make takes us one step closer to that product vision. And they help us to prioritize, because it's easy now to say no to initiatives that are not in line with the product strategy. When it's spelled out, it's clear, it's there for people to see. And then all that continuous discovery work that we were already doing, and that we'll continue doing, will help us get tactical input along the way. So all the things that I've shared so far brings me to my 5th and final piece of advice, which is if you meet these detours or roadblocks, to embrace them, because it's really valuable to have maybe other problem areas exposed so that you're able to address them sooner rather than later. And one concrete example from us is that throughout the same time period that we were working on product strategy, and partially through the work on product strategy, we realized that we should organize our platform team differently. It wasn't working ideally the way we had it before. And so we did that in tandem with making the strategies, and that was sort of a really useful byproduct for us. So in summary, these are the 5 main things that I hope you will take away from the presentation. So build the scaffolding first, using your existing strategy documents. Use the product community, and I'd urge you to both be inspired by it, but share back to it. Create a draft really early on, and iterate. Spend enough time on distilling your product strategy into something brief and useful. And if you meet detours and roadblocks, to embrace them. And I'd like to say to everyone, if you're sitting in the audience or if you're listening from home and you don't have a product strategy today, I'd say start one on Monday. Just jump in 2 feet first. I think you'll find it fun. You'll learn a lot during the process, and I'm absolutely confident that you'll be able to make a product strategy. So I'm really grateful that I got to be here today, and thank you for your time.